On paper, Cherokee DNA should tell a simple story. The Cherokee are described as descended from Siberian ancestors who crossed a land bridge into America. But when scientists tested Cherokee families in the Appalachians, they found something no one could explain. Nearly a third carried genetic markers tied to the Mediterranean and the Middle East, not the classic Native American types. Why does Cherokee heritage include Old World roots? And who is keeping this chapter hidden? This genetic riddle could rewrite everything we thought we knew about America's origins. During the last ice age, a landmass known as Beringia connected Siberia and Alaska, forming a frozen bridge between Asia and North America. According to the most widely accepted scientific model, small bands of hunter-gatherers crossed this expanse between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago. Over generations, these early migrants spread south and east, becoming the ancestors of all native peoples across the Americas. As these populations moved and settled, their genetic signatures became distinct. Scientists tracking maternal ancestry using mitochondrial DNA identified 5 main haplogroups among Native Americans, A, B, C, D, and a rare type called X. Each of these lineages can be traced back to ancient populations in Northeast Asia, reinforcing the land bridge theory. In studies of enrolled Cherokee and other southeastern tribes, nearly every individual carries one of these native haplogroups. For example, in a peer-reviewed study of Cherokee Nation citizens in Oklahoma, 100% of the sample belonged to A, B, C, D, or X. Similar results appear in ancient remains from mound sites in the southeast, dating back over 1,000 years. These findings have shaped the textbook version of Native American origins for decades. The expectation is clear. Any group with deep roots in the southeast, like the Cherokee, should display almost exclusively these Native American lineages. The presence of A, B, C, D, or X is not just common, it is considered a defining marker of indigenous ancestry in North America. This genetic pattern is so consistent that it serves as a baseline for identifying native heritage in both living people and ancient remains. For scientists, any significant deviation from this model would be unexpected and would demand an explanation. The standard theory leaves little room for surprises. When researchers turned to Cherokee descended families in Appalachia, the numbers broke every expectation. Instead of the classic Native American haplogroups, A, B, C, D, and the rare X, they found something few could explain. In a sample of 52 individuals, only 7.4% carried the expected native lineages. The rest belonged to haplogroups almost unheard of in Native American genetics. T appeared in 26.9% of samples, a rate nearly identical to modern Egypt. U showed up in 25%, a frequency that matches populations in the Middle East and Mediterranean. J, H, and X also made strong appearances, with J at levels common in southern Europe and the Levant. The raw data read like a challenge to the standard model. T and U together accounted for more than half the sample. Haplogroup T is rare in Native American populations, but dominates in certain Old World regions. U, especially the U5 subclade, is usually found among Berbers, Egyptians, and Greeks. J and H, both widespread in Europe and North Africa, turned up in several Cherokee-descended lines. Even X, which does appear in some native groups, was present at higher than expected levels and with unique mutations not seen elsewhere. These results did not match known Native American or European patterns. Many of the Cherokee samples carried mutations not found in any global database, but did match each other, suggesting a distinct interrelated population rather than isolated cases of recent admixture. The geographic distribution of these haplogroups closely mirrored Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and North African populations, not the Siberian or East Asian sources predicted by the land bridge theory. With so many unmatched lineages and Old World markers, the Cherokee DNA profile demanded a new explanation. Family stories often hold more weight than statistics, especially when they carry the names of people who shaped American culture. Elvis Presley's mother, Gladys, grew up hearing that her family's roots stretched back to a Cherokee ancestor known as White Dove. The story passed from mother to daughter for generations, weaving together pride, loss, and a sense of belonging to something older than the country itself. Tracing the line through Nancy Burdine, the legend says Elvis inherited not just a famous voice, but a thread of Cherokee and Jewish heritage. Yet when DNA testing entered the picture, the results were as tangled as the stories. One branch of the family reportedly carried Native American haplogroup B, but other claims pointed to markers more common in Jewish communities. The official records, meanwhile, offered no clear proof, just a trail of names and memories, always a step ahead of the evidence. The Dougherty family carries a different kind of legacy. Cornelius Dougherty, an Irish trader in colonial North Carolina, married a woman said to be the daughter of a Cherokee chief. Their descendants became part of the fabric of the Appalachian region, their story blending into the hills and rivers. In recent years, DNA tests among Dougherty descendants have turned up haplogroups J and U, lineages tied to Jewish and North African populations. The numbers alone might suggest a recent European connection, but the family's oral history insists on deeper, older bonds. These results do not fit easily into the standard model of Native American ancestry, nor do they match the patterns seen in most Cherokee Nation citizens today. For families like these, the search for identity is more than a scientific puzzle. It is a way of holding on to stories that might otherwise be lost. Each DNA result is a new clue, but also a reminder that heritage is lived in kitchens, at funerals, in the quiet passing of a name from one generation to the next. The controversy over Cherokee DNA is not just about numbers or migration routes. It is about people trying to find their place in a story that resists simple answers. Wild theories and sharp skepticism collide whenever the Cherokee DNA mystery is raised. Some researchers and amateur historians point to a high frequency of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern haplogroups in Cherokee descended families, and they see traces of ancient seafaring. They suggest that Jewish traders, Phoenician navigators, or Berber explorers could have crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus, leaving genetic footprints in the Appalachian Mountains. These ideas often draw on legends of the lost tribes of Israel, or on stories of Phoenician ships blown off course and landing in the New World thousands of years ago. For proponents, unique mutations and the clustering of T and U lineages among certain Cherokee families seem too distinct to be explained by recent European mixing alone. They argue these patterns mirror Egypt, Israel, and the Levant more closely than any colonial-era population, and they point to shared markers that appear nowhere else in global databases. Mainstream scientists and skeptics are quick to push back. Population geneticists and anthropologists warn that such claims rely on self-selected samples, not on enrolled tribal members, or on verified genealogies. The most widely cited studies that support ancient Old World links have never released their raw data for independent review. No peer-reviewed study of Cherokee Nation citizens or of ancient remains from the Southeast has found significant traces of T, U, J, or H. Instead, every rigorous analysis of enrolled Cherokee shows a genetic profile dominated by A, B, C, D, and X, just as predicted by the Landbridge model. Critics point to the dangers of sampling bias. When participants are recruited based on family stories or on commercial DNA curiosity, results can be skewed by chance, by mistaken identity, or by undocumented recent admixture. Without transparent methods and reproducible results, the anomaly remains an outlier, not a paradigm shift. The debate grows sharper when the question of identity enters the room. For some, the idea of ancient Mediterranean or Jewish contact offers a sense of pride and a wider connection to a global story. For others, it threatens to undermine the hard-won recognition of Cherokee sovereignty and heritage, replacing lived tradition with speculative science. The lack of raw sequence data makes it impossible for outside researchers to verify claims, or to test for laboratory errors. Even the most striking DNA results, like a cluster of T haplogroups unmatched anywhere else, can be interpreted as evidence of isolated post-Columbus era admixture, rather than proof of prehistoric migration. Mainstream scholars insist that until ancient DNA from archaeological sites shows these old-world lineages in pre-contact burials, the standard model stands. Yet the questions refuse to fade. The absence of public data, the unique clustering of certain lineages, and the persistence of oral histories keep the uncertainty alive. Is it all the result of centuries of intermarriage and lost records, or is there a deeper story waiting to be uncovered? The only certainty is that the Cherokee DNA debate is far from settled. Each new theory and each rebuttal leaves the door open for further discovery. And for now, the origins of these genetic signatures remain as tangled as the mountains themselves. Long before the first European ships anchored on the Atlantic coast, the ancestors of the Cherokee were shaping their own world in the Appalachian highlands and river valleys. Archaeologists trace their story through layers of earth and clay. In western North Carolina, the Biltmore Mound rises above the floodplain, built and rebuilt between 200 and 600 CE. These middle woodland mounds, some for burials, others for ceremonies, anchor the Cherokee past deep in the soil of the southeast. Later, from around 1000 to 1500 CE, the Pisgah phase transformed the landscape. Towns took shape around broad plazas and platform mounds, each crowned with a council house or temple. Here, leaders debated, rituals unfolded, and the pulse of community life beat steadily. Pottery from this era, stamped with intricate patterns, reveals a people both rooted and evolving, blending old traditions with new forms of organization. The question of where the Cherokee came from remains unsettled. Linguists place their language in the Iroquoian family, linking them distantly to the Haudenosaunee of the Great Lakes. Some scholars argue for a migration southward centuries before Columbus, while others point to archaeological continuity in the southeast, stretching back thousands of years. Oral tradition, too, speaks of ancient ties to these mountains and rivers, resisting tidy answers. What is clear is that by the time the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, the Cherokee were firmly established, with towns spread across present-day Tennessee, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Cherokee society was anything but simple. Their world was organized into a dual system: white towns for peace, red towns for war. Each had its own leaders, ceremonies, and responsibilities. Beneath this structure lay 7 matrilineal clans, with identity and inheritance passing through mothers. Women owned land, managed households, and shaped the next generation. This matrilineal system gave Cherokee women forms of authority rarely seen in early American societies. Spiritual power was once concentrated in the hands of the Ani Kutani, a priestly class remembered in legend for both wisdom and corruption. According to oral history, the Anikutani were overthrown in a revolt, ending hereditary religious control and opening the way for spiritual leadership based on merit and vision. Whether myth or history, the story captures a society willing to reinvent itself from within. In the 1820s, a blacksmith named Sequoyah undertook a challenge that would reshape Cherokee identity. Without formal education, Sequoyah created a syllabary, a set of written symbols representing the sounds of the Cherokee language. Within a few years, literacy spread rapidly. The Cherokee Phoenix, the first Native American newspaper, began publication in 1828. Sacred stories, laws, and histories could now be preserved in writing, giving the Cherokee a tool to defend their culture in a changing world. Archaeology, language, and tradition all point to a people with deep roots and complex institutions. The Cherokee story is not just a tale of migration or genetic markers. It is the record of a society that built towns, shaped landscapes, and created systems of power and meaning that endure to this day. In the spring of 1540, Hernando de Soto's expedition cut a path through the heart of the southeast, passing through villages that would later be known as Cherokee country, Tennessee, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Spanish chroniclers recorded bustling towns, cultivated fields, and powerful chiefs, but the encounter brought more than swords and trade goods. Within a few years, invisible enemies swept ahead of the Spanish, smallpox, measles, and influenza. These diseases moved faster than any army, reaching towns the Spanish never saw. By some estimates, half to 90% of the region's native population died within decades, their names and stories lost before they could be written down. In 1567, Juan Pardo led another Spanish force into the Carolina interior, determined to establish a string of forts and claim the land for Spain. The plan unraveled quickly. Native resistance flared, and within a year, every one of Pardo's forts was destroyed in coordinated attacks. Spanish ambitions for the interior collapsed. By the end of the 16th century, Spain withdrew from the Appalachians, leaving behind only rumors, scattered artifacts, and a legacy of devastation. The demographic collapse was staggering. Entire towns vanished, and survivors gathered in new villages, merging families and traditions. The loss of elders and leaders fractured oral histories, and many records of ancient lineages disappeared. When later generations tried to trace their ancestry, they found only gaps, missing links in both memory and blood. The trauma of these first contacts set the stage for centuries of upheaval, shaping the Cherokee world long before the push for removal began. In 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, setting in motion a policy that would devastate the Cherokee Nation. Gold discoveries in Georgia fueled settler demands for Cherokee land, and state officials moved quickly to strip away legal protections. The Cherokee turned to the courts, and in 1832, the Supreme Court ruled in Worcester versus Georgia that their nation was sovereign, its boundaries and rights recognized by federal law. That ruling, however, was ignored by President Andrew Jackson and state authorities. Federal troops soon arrived to enforce removal, rounding up families and forcing them into stockades. The journey west, over 1,200 miles on foot and wagon, became known as the Trail of Tears. Disease, starvation, and exposure claimed the lives of an estimated 4,000 to 6,000 Cherokee, nearly a quarter of the entire nation. Military records and survivor accounts describe families separated, children lost, and elders buried along the route. Women, who had long been the backbone of Cherokee society, struggled to keep clans together, passing on language and stories in the face of unimaginable loss. Their matrilineal system, with land and identity flowing through mothers, helped preserve a sense of belonging even as the nation was torn apart. In Indian Territory, the Cherokee rebuilt. But new threats followed. The Dawes Act of 1887 broke up communal land, assigning parcels to individuals and opening surplus land to outsiders. By the early 1900s, federal officials installed chiefs for a day, undermining real self-government. Yet the Cherokee persisted. In 1975, they adopted a new constitution reclaiming democratic rule. Wilma Mankiller, elected principal chief in 1985, led efforts to restore healthcare, education, and cultural pride. The trauma of removal remains, but so does the will to endure, woven through the lives of women and leaders who refuse to let the nation disappear. Today, Cherokee identity stands at the crossroads of science and story, as DNA evidence unsettles what textbooks still teach. The debate isn't just academic. Federal recognition, ancestry claims, and cultural survival hang in the balance. In a world rewriting its past with every new genome, even the oldest truths may face the test. What does heritage mean when history and genetics refuse to agree?